Hey everyone! Welcome to the Bold and Beautiful 24. I'm Alessio, and I'm so excited to have you here. If you love Bold and Beautiful, then you're in the right place. Make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a video. Alright, let's dive right in.
Will Spencer, still reeling from the fragile beginnings of his complicated entanglement with Luna Nozawa, stood in front of Remy Price with a dazed, almost disbelieving expression, his breath uneven, his fists curled tight at his sides as though bracing himself for a blow he hadn't yet received, but knew with absolute certainty was coming. Remy, usually Kumbo, the room shifted on its axis, every piece of Will's reality tilting into chaos, because those 5 words detonated like a bomb, shredding through the fragile trust and illusions Will had built around Luna's declarations of love and loyalty, the visions she painted of their perfect future together with a baby cradled in their arms, the promises whispered in the dark that he had clung to like lifelines against the storm of doubt everyone, from Katie, to Bill, to Electra Forrester, had tried to hammer into his head, and now, with Remy standing there, eyes burning with equal parts shame and defiance, Will's entire foundation quaked, his voice cracking as he demanded clarity, demanded answers, demanded to know if Remy was lying, if this was some manipulative ploy to fracture him from Luna when he had just begun to carve out a new life with her. But the trembling in Remy's voice betrayed no deception, only a gnawing regret and an anger at himself that he couldn't quite mask, as he admitted in a low rasp that what happened with Luna hadn't been planned, that it was a collision of loneliness, vulnerability, and temptation, that Luna, in one of her spiraling storms of confusion and desperation to be loved, had sought him out, crossing a line they both knew could never be uncrossed, and Will staggered back as if Remy's words had physically struck him, the image of Luna, his Luna, curling into Remy's arms, whispering to him the same sweet nothing she had whispered to Will, shattering something inside him he didn't know could break, and his mind scrambled to replay every moment with her, every kiss, every embrace, every time she swore he was the only man she wanted, all of it unraveling now in the wake of Remy's confession, and though rage swelled in his chest, though betrayal screamed in his veins, there was also an undeniable, sickening ache because a part of him had feared this, had sensed the cracks in Luna's story, the evasions, the flickers of guilt in her eyes, and now, hearing Remy admit the truth, those suspicions cemented into painful reality. But even as Will's anger threatened to consume him, another deeper layer of torment clawed at him. The baby, Luna's baby, the child she had claimed with fervent certainty was his, the legacy she swore would bind them together forever, and now, in the spiraling mess of revelations, Will's mind screamed with one unbearable question: was the baby even his, or could Remy Price, standing there with haunted eyes and clenched fists, be the father of the child that Will had already begun to imagine holding, protecting, loving with all the strength in his soul? And the silence that followed Remy's confession was thick, suffocating, broken only by Will's ragged breathing, until his fury exploded, his voice echoing through the guesthouse as he demanded to know why Remy hadn't come forward sooner, why he had let Will dream of a future that might already be crumbling before it even began, why he had kept silent while Will defended Luna against the world, against his father Bill's threats, against Katie's icy disdain, against Electra's heartbreak and disgust, all while another man, his so-called friend, knew the truth, carried the weight of a secret that could destroy him, and Remy, voice trembling but resolute, admitted that he had stayed quiet because he hadn't wanted to be the one to detonate Will's fragile hope, because for all his bravado and edge, he cared about Will and didn't want to be the source of his destruction. But guilt had festered, eaten him alive, and with Luna's pregnancy tying everything into knots, he could no longer live with the deception, and so he had chosen now to rip off the mask, no matter the fallout. And Will, his face pale, his body trembling with a cocktail of rage and heartbreak, whispered hoarsely that he didn't know if he hated Remy more for what he did, or for daring to tell him now, when it was too late to go back, too late to undo the betrayal, too late to erase the image of Luna's faithless love burned into his brain. And yet beneath the venom of his words was a glimmer of something else, a desperation for truth, for clarity, for the one thing that might save him from spiraling into complete despair, the paternity test that now loomed like a thundercloud over all of them, because if the child was his, then Luna's betrayal might become a wound he would be forced to endure, but if the child was Remy's, then everything, his love, his loyalty, his sacrifices, would crumble into dust. And as the weight of that realization settled over them, both men stood in a silence so heavy it felt like the walls themselves might collapse, knowing that the fallout of this confession wasn't just a private fracture but a detonation that would ripple through Spencer, Forrester, and Nozawa circles alike, with Bill poised to weaponize the truth, Katie ready to pounce on Luna's disgrace, Electra aching to watch her rival burn, and Sheila Carter, Luna's unlikely defender, waiting to twist the chaos into her own designs. And Will, clutching the fraying remnants of his heart, realized with bone-deep dread that nothing in his world would ever be the same again after hearing those 5 words, "She slept with me too." Yet the silence didn't last long, because Will's pain had to spill somewhere, and his voice, low at first, but rising with every syllable, trembled with a fury that he could no longer contain as he threw Remy's confession back in his face, calling him a coward, a backstabber, a parasite feeding on the fragments of someone else's happiness. And yet even as the words lashed out, Will's eyes betrayed something far more vulnerable than anger, the raw fear of being nothing, of being the fool, of being the man who was played for a dream while Luna sought warmth elsewhere. And Remy, cornered by his own truth, didn't fight back, didn't raise his fists or unleash his usual snark, but instead stood rooted, letting Will's fury crash over him because some part of him believed he deserved it, some part of him had already accepted that this was the price of honesty. But then Will's trembling hands ran through his hair as his voice cracked on the one word that burned through the entire room, the baby. And for the first time, Remy's confident facade shattered completely, his face paling as he admitted he didn't know, that he hadn't thought about the possibility until Luna's pregnancy was announced, that he had shoved the thought into a locked box in his head and prayed it would never surface. But now, standing face to face with Will's rage and heartbreak, he couldn't deny that there was a chance, however slim or monumental, that the child might not be Will's. And hearing that was like knives carving through Will's chest, because his whole world had already revolved around the image of that baby, the redemption he thought he had found in Luna's love, the family he thought he was building, the legacy he thought would silence his father's doubts and Katie's criticisms. And now, with Remy's truth slithering through the cracks, Will's knees almost buckled under the sheer weight of despair. And in that moment, every flash of Luna's smile, every whisper of her promises, every late-night vow that he was her only one came back to him with a sickening twist, now tainted, poisoned by the knowledge that she had given those same lips, those same whispers, that same fire to another man, this man. And the betrayal bled into his voice as he spat that Luna had made a fool of him, had made him fight his family and betray Electra and sever ties with the people who had always stood by him, all for a love that now felt hollow. And Remy, though pained, lifted his chin and told Will that it wasn't as simple as love or betrayal, that Luna was drowning in her own demons, in her own need for validation, in her own craving to be wanted, and that she had sought him out not to destroy Will but because she was lost, broken, spiraling. And though the words were meant to soften the blow, they only fueled Will's fury, because all he heard was another excuse for Luna, another attempt to justify what could never be justified. And he demanded to know if Remy loved her, if this had been more than a moment of weakness, if Luna's heart belonged to him too. And the way Remy's silence stretched, heavy and unbearable, was almost worse than an outright yes, because it meant that somewhere in that tangled mess of guilt and regret was a feeling, a tether, a possibility that this betrayal wasn't just physical but emotional. And Will's chest heaved as he staggered backward, his mind unraveling with the cruel irony that even Sheila Carter, the woman branded the most untrustworthy in Los Angeles, had proven herself more honest with Deacon than Luna had with him. And in that moment, Will's pain transformed into something sharper, colder, a determination to confront Luna with the truth and force her to admit everything, to look her in the eye and see whether the woman he had fought for, the woman he had loved, could finally drop the mask and tell him whether their entire love story had been built on lies. And Remy, though beaten down by guilt, warned him that confronting her in rage would only make things worse, that Luna's fragile grip on stability could shatter in an instant. But Will didn't care, didn't want to be handled, didn't want to be pacified, because all that mattered now was ripping the truth from Luna's lips. And with his voice hoarse, he vowed that if she had lied to him, if she had betrayed him beyond repair, he would not be the fool who carried her secrets, and he would not raise a child in a web of deception. And as he stormed out of the guest house with fire in his eyes, Remy collapsed into the nearest chair, burying his face in his hands, knowing he had just lit a fuse that could burn down not just Will and Luna's fragile love but the lives of everyone tied to it. Because once the Spencers knew, once Bill learned that his son's child might not even be his grandchild, once Katie saw the opening to strike, once Electra tasted the satisfaction of Luna's downfall, and once Sheila sensed the chaos she could twist to her advantage, the battlefield would explode, and no one, not Will, not Luna, not Remy himself, would walk away unscarred. And when Will finally reached the Forrester mansion, his chest burning with the weight of betrayal and his fists trembling from the violent storm boiling inside of him, he found Luna in the living room surrounded by sketches and fabrics, humming to herself with that deceptively innocent glow that once charmed him. And for a fleeting second his heart lurched because she looked so untainted, so devoted, so full of the hope and purity she always insisted to find their future together. But that illusion shattered the instant he remembered Remy's broken voice whispering those poisonous words, "She slept with me too," and The fury surged back with brutal force, so barked her name in a tone that cut sharper than a blade, startling Luna as she looked up with wide doe eyes that immediately shifted from curiosity to concern, because she knew instinctively something inside Will had cracked, and when he demanded through clenched teeth if she had anything to confess, anything at all, her lips quivered as she stumbled over denials, insisting she didn't know what he meant, swearing she loved him, pleading that he calmed down because he was scaring her, but his rage only deepened because he could see the panic in her eyes, the cracks forming in her mask, and he spat Remy's name like venom, watching as her face drained of color and her breath caught in her throat, and that involuntary flicker of guilt told him everything he needed to know, every lie she had rehearsed, every excuse she had prepared, every plea she had thought might buy her forgiveness crumbling in the face of his fury, and Luna's tears began to spill as she admitted in a trembling whisper that it had been a mistake, a moment of weakness, something she regretted from the second it happened.